Hi everyone! This video is an introduction to beetles. In the video, we'll go over what beetles are, what we're going to do with them in this activity, and how to calculate the different numbers that you'll need along the way. You should watch this video before you start the beetle activity and refer back to it along the way if you have any questions. Beetles are magical, mystical creatures that we're going to use to learn about the different microrevolutionary processes. And the way we're going to do that is by modeling the beetles using beads. So this is one beetle. This is also one beetle. And here is another beetle. So you can see in every example we've got here, two beads represents one beetle, one of these organisms that we're looking at. And we're doing this because they are diploids, so they would have two alleles for every gene. And the gene we're going to be studying is the color of the organisms. So as you can see, there's three different possibilities for the genotypes they can have. And in beetles, red is completely dominant over yellow. So this beetle here would be homozygous dominant. This one would be heterozygous. And this one here is homozygous recessive. And when we translate that to phenotypes, because red is dominant, that means that this beetle, the critter that these code for, would appear red. This beetle would also appear red because it has this dominant red allele. And this beetle here would be yellow in appearance. So every beetle is represented by two beads. You know their genotypes and you know their phenotypes. In the beetle activity, you are going to observe several beetle populations on specific islands where different things happen to them, and see what effect those events have on the allele frequencies in each population. So this relates back to what you learned earlier in the semester about Hardy-Weinberg. If allele frequencies change between generations, then the population has evolved. On most of the islands, we start out with an initial gene pool for the beetle population. To see what genotypes occur in each generation, we put the beetles into a mating bag and mix them around and then pull them out one at a time without looking. To determine the genotypes of the beetles in each generation, we pull them out of the bag two at a time, because remember, each pair of beads is one beetle. And since we're starting from the beginning this time, this will be our generation 1. As I pull pairs of beads out of the bag, I'm going to try and get them to behave on the board. I'm going to keep them in pairs, in their genotypes, so that I can keep track of how many of each genotype I have. So here's a heterozygote, another heterozygote, another heterozygote, another heterozygote. Here's one that's homozygous dominant. Another heterozygote. One homozygous dominant. And one more heterozygote. And this is going to be different for every exercise we do. It just depends on what comes out of the bag for that particular generation. So the next thing we need to do is use this information here about the genotypes that were created to calculate the allele frequencies. And so on the sheets that you get for this activity, you're going to have places to jot down how many of each genotype you have, how many of each type of allele you have, and also the frequencies for each allele. So in your data sheet, you'll notice there are places for red beetles, red-yellow beetles, and yellow beetles. So these all refer to the genotypes. So if I look at what I have here in this example, I have 2 red beetles. For red-yellow beetles, heterozygotes, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And for yellow beetles, I have 2 pairs. The next thing I need to know is the total number of red alleles that I have. So if I count up all the red alleles, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And if I count up all the yellows, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. In the next column, it's asking what is the total number of alleles if I add up the red plus yellow. So 10 plus 10, just adding up these, I get 20. And then the final thing we need to do here is calculate the allele frequencies. So in this one, I need to calculate the frequency of the red allele. So that's going to be how many total red beads do I have out of the combined red and yellow beads together. So 10 red beads out of the total of 20 beads is 0.50. And remember, we always record allele frequencies as decimals to 2 decimal places. For the yellow allele frequency, I have 10 yellow beads out of a total of 20 yellow plus red beads, so that also equals 0.50. At this point, something different is going to happen to the beetles on each island, and it depends which island they're on. For some of them, it might be a predator. For others, it might be a natural disaster, or it could be a special way of mating that they start doing. It's going to depend on which island you're looking at as to exactly what happens. But in any case, something's going to happen to those beetles. The ones that are left are going to go into the mating bag. And yes, I'm being deliberately mysterious here because it's going to be different for each island. The mating bag will shake, and then we'll pull out the beads to represent what we have in generation 2. So to see which beetles we have in generation 2, again, we'll pull them out of the bag 2 at a time. Every 2 beads represent 1 beetle. And as before, keep them organized by genotype so they're easier to keep track of. Now remember, if you were in class, you would be doing this, pulling beads out of the bag and keeping track of them. So here we have a homozygous dominant beetle. Oh my goodness, these beads need to behave. A homozygous recessive beetle. Another homozygous recessive beetle. And another. Homozygous dominant. Homozygous recessive, and that's it. Now remember, this is just an example. This is not any of the specific islands that you're going to be studying, but this is an example of what you might see after a generation where something has happened to the beetles. So if you're looking at generation 2, 3, or 4, something has happened that might change their allele frequencies. So then, to collect your data, like we did last time, you need to count how many of each genotype we have, and then look for the allele frequencies. So, how many red beetles do we have here? 1, 2. How many red yellows? 1, 2, 3, 4. How many yellows? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. So the next thing we need is a number of red alleles, or individual red beads. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And then the number of individual yellow alleles, or yellow beads. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. So our total number of red and yellow alleles together is going to be 22. Now this may be different depending on which island you're looking at. And finally, we need to calculate the allele frequencies. So the frequency of the red allele, there are 8 red beads out of the total of 22. So with a little bit of quick math, that is 0.36. And for our yellow alleles, that's 14 yellow beads out of the total of 22. So that would equal 0.64. And remember, we always round to 2 decimal places for allele frequencies. Based on this information, you can see that this population seems to be evolving because the allele frequencies have changed. And again, this is just an example. We're going to give you the beads for each island and describe what's happening on each island, and you're going to collect the data and run the calculations to find out what's happening with the allele frequencies. This is not actual data, so this is not what you're going to be collecting. But after you do collect the data for each of the islands that we provide you with, you're going to be creating graphs for each island, showing us what happens to the allele frequencies over time. So some of them might go up, some of them might go down, but you're going to use that information to tell us if the population is evolving, and also using the information that we give you about what's happening on each island to figure out which microevolutionary process is occurring. So that's a general introduction to the Beetle Lab. We're going to be giving you specific information for every island that you need to collect data from and showing you the beads that we have for each generation. And you can come back and look at this video again if you need a reminder on how to do those calculations. But again, the numbers from this video are not the actual data that you need to collect. They're just an example. And as always, feel free to contact your teacher if you're confused or if you need any help with any of this.